Sneak behind you. One of us better lose so quick.
Yeah.
Move on. Or flip-flop, whatever. I've been.
Hello, folks. Just a little bit of housekeeping. There's an exit up here in this corner, and of course in the back. And if you haven't silenced your phones, would you please do that? Also, if there's any empty seats, praise God, we could use them. Oh, you can't hear me? All right, I'll talk louder. All right. Well, this is wonderful. We had to grab all the extra chairs, but of course, what a fascinating topic. I think we're in for a real treat. Many have heard about the shroud over their lifetimes, but I doubt if you've gotten this much detail about what the shroud is really all about, especially recent findings. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Pam McCue. She's really quite an expert in this, needless to say. I'll just tell you a little bit about Pam, okay? Pam McCue's focus on the science and wonder of the Shroud of Turin began intensely with her research back in 2014, after retiring as a senior executive in the U.S. Department of Defense. Pam earned her bachelor and master's degree in electrical engineering and worked for 30 years in defense science and technology. And speaking of her unique ministry, Pam reveals her passion for opening minds and hearts to the miraculous. Quote, "The extensive science of the shroud engages those who have lost their wonder of God, as well as the many who still think science and God are incompatible." Pam's presentation of the past and very recent science behind the Shroud of Turin prompts people to reconsider their doubts, giving God, the Holy Spirit, a chance to energize their faith. Pam's taken her Shroud of Turin presentation to church groups, schools, retreats, and public venues via the mobile display she developed and now operates through her company, Faith and Reason Enterprises, LLC. Her presentations now include the high-impact Anthania exhibit from the 2024 Catholic National Eucharistic Congress. She works closely with Anthania to keep her exhibit current, and she supports the permanent National Shroud of Turin exhibit now being developed in Washington. She's coming to us from the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast, and would you please welcome Pam?
Thank you, guys. Can you hear me okay? In the back? Can you hear me okay now? Hello? Is that better? Okay. I don't know how to go louder. Okay, I will talk loudly, and we will do that. Thank you so much for coming. It has been a joy to be here at St. Gregory in this area. I'm very much looking forward to being at Our Lady of Sorrows tomorrow night and St. Raphael on Wednesday night. And I love sharing the shroud. That's why I'm here. That's why I drive all over the country with this exhibit, sharing it. So thank you. And what I'm going to do, I'll try to go at a relatively rapid pace with this. You'll hear a few things that you don't see in the exhibit, but the exhibit also has many more things that I won't be able to cover tonight. So I hope you have a chance to look at it and soak it in and ask me any questions that you have. So there's two ways that I focus my talks, and honestly, they're just about the same, and that is either the shroud, the science and wonder of the Shroud of Turin, or passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus revealed. Since it was Lent, I went with the passion, death, and resurrection route, but you'll see some of the science as well. This is the shroud as it was displayed the last time that it was displayed publicly. That was 2015. It's always in Turin, Italy, and that was where it was. There was some hope that they would display it last year for the Jubilee year. That didn't happen. Now they're working toward a 2033 display. That would be 2,000 years since the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. So I'm hopeful that that will happen in Turin. So you can, when you see it, one of the things that usually surprises people is how long it is. It's a very long cloth, about 14 feet long and a little less than 4 feet wide. It has these two tracks down the side, there and there, that are damaged from a fire where it was almost destroyed. But then it has those strange image areas, the back image and the front image of a man pretty clearly on the cloth. And we're going to talk through some of those characteristics. So before I get started looking at the detail of it, I think this picture is very helpful in understanding what you're looking like on the shroud and why it is so long. So this is a picture of a portion of a famous painting, and in it Jesus was laid in the shroud at the foot of the cross. The body was laid on one end. The body was laid on one end, and then the top was wrapped over the top of the body and laid on it. And that's how you get those two images head to head on the same side. So one where the body was laid and laid flat on it, and the top image where it draped over the top of the body. So starting to look at it in a little detail, so on the left side you see that replica of that long, a small replica of the long 14-foot cloth. So here we're looking at just the front portion of it. So it's a little less than half of the cloth. On it you see that vague image of a man. You can see some features. You can see the eyes, the nose, the beard, the mustache, the beard, the chest, the arms. And for reference, the arms are crossed left over right. You can see the nail hole in the left hand. And the reason that's important is because you're always getting flips with the shroud, partially because that shroud flips over the body, but also you're taking pictures of it, you're looking at the image different ways when you look at the photographic negative. So if you keep in mind that it's always the left hand that you see with the nail hole, it's useful. And you can see those damaged areas that I referenced earlier. If you look at a enhanced version where the contrast has been changed a little, you can see it even better. So you start to see those things that look pretty clearly to be characteristics of a crucified man. And I'll say up front, the medical community is very persuaded that whatever this cloth is, that it wrapped a real crucified man. All the wounds and the blood and the way blood behaves, all of that looks to be totally what it appears to be, the blood and the wounds from a crucified man that were wrapped in the cloth. But the real reveal was when the first photograph was taken. And we're going to talk about that more at the end. But this odd effect where the photographic negative pops out with a three-dimensional effect is like nothing in the world. There's nothing that gives that effect. And that's what people can't reproduce today. We know the characteristics of the shroud at the microscopic level, but we can't make something that looks that detailed today. So we'll talk about that a little more at the end. But this photographic negative with that three-dimensional characteristics gave us so much information that it made it clear that we're dealing with something very miraculous, if you will, or at least very, very unusual and very valuable. So that's what set the scientific study into motion. So I've told some of you, so it's called the Shroud of Turin, or the Shroud, or the Turin Shroud. That isn't what it was called for most of its life. For most of its life, it was revered as the Holy Shroud. However, when science got involved, things started changing. So they couldn't leave holy in the title. So it began its life as the Turin Shroud, or the Shroud of Turin. And that is because it does reside in Turin, Italy. So with all that, scientists started studying it. And they really, there are so many people over the years that have been totally absorbed with it. Some of them thought it was the burial cloth of Jesus from the beginning. Some of them weren't sure, but they were very, very interested in it anyway. There's many books. I don't know how many books there are on the shroud, but I would guess thousands. Many of them are doctors who are all day at the hospital or their practice. They come home in the evening and they're wrapping friends or their priest or whoever in a mock-up of the shroud to try to understand the marks that are on it and the wounds that are on it. So people have been very absorbed. This picture I like because it illustrates studying it to understand what the face looked like and how it fit over a real body. And so when they did, through that process, we have come to a very much an agreed upon posture for that body and what the man of the shroud looks like. And this beautiful statue that's up front is one of perhaps 5 or 6 statues that have been commissioned that show that posture. And it also tells us the basic characteristics of the man. So he was almost 6 feet tall. We usually use 5'10" to 6 feet as a range because of a little uncertainty. Which was tall at the time because the average was 5'5". He weighed around 175 pounds. He was pretty lean. He was muscular. You can see that from especially the detail in the photographic negative. He had the characteristics of a Jewish man. He had a long oval face. He had almond-shaped eyes. He had the beard and the mustache and the long hair that would be typical of a first-century Jewish man. We see the posture of the body is interesting. I think it's one of the most telling things of it. But I'll just say now, the posture of the body with legs up and head and shoulders up is, we think, because the body was on the cross long enough that the body began to stiffen in death. And the wonderful thing is that also sets the timeline for how soon this image was made, because this is the posture of the body at the moment the image was made. And that, so the fact that it was still in rigor mortis means that it was probably within about 40 hours of death. So that sets a really good timeline for all of this to be coincident with the resurrection. So you see these things that I've given you as the introduction, And I'm gonna now, the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk about a little of what we see at the crucifixion, which is very telling, I think. But before that, I want to address some more general facts. Because you wonder, okay, it sure looks like this is supposed to be Jesus, but is this really the burial cloth of Jesus? Could it be the real shroud? So I want to address a few things before we get to more details about Jesus and the shroud. So the first thing is the age of the cloth, and this over time has been the most controversial thing. So I'll tell you up front, the linen looks to be first century. And I say that for a number of reasons. For one, the quality and the weave match first century linen. When they had been looking for control samples to compare the shroud to, they can find things in the first century that look like it, but they can't find things in the later centuries that look like it. The linen making process was different. There are things like banding where there are color variations, kind of like dye lots in fabric now. Those color variations come from processing flax fibers in small batches, and the color varies. So we see that effect in the linen, and you would not see that effect in later linen, like 13th, 14th century. There have been 5 different dating tests that are used on linen that are not necessarily precise. Some of them have uncertainty that goes over 200, 300, 400 years, but all 5 of those dating tests are consistent with first century, and they are not consistent with later 13th, 14th century dates. So the one outlier is the carbon-14 testing. So it was done in 1988, and the testers announced that with 95% confidence, the linen was made between 1260 and 1390 AD. So what we know now is those tests were not credible. They actually hid data and misreported it. Their own protocols would have said they should have called it not enough data to test, inconclusive. But they reported it with confidence anyway. So now through lawsuits, there's been access to the whole data sets, and it's been discredited, but it did caused a lot of confusion over time. But I'll tell you now, the linen is the most confidence would be that it was first century, consistent with Jesus. So there's pollen that was recovered from the linen. And pollen, if you watch CSI shows, you know pollen is a great forensic tool. It's microscopic, it sticks really well, and you can tie it to a region. So there were 58 types of pollen that were recovered from the shroud. Those numbers vary a little here and there depending on what people count, but that's a good middle of the road number, 58 types. 35 of those were from the Jerusalem area. 13 of them only exist in the Holy Land, and the others were from Asia Minor and Europe, which are on the, we think, the likely path of the shroud. So pollen says that it was in Jerusalem. There were also dirt particles. So the dirt is a particular, relatively rare kind of building material called travertine aragonite limestone. And that is the building material in Jerusalem. But even more than that, the specific chemical composition, in particular, the fact that the dirt has very little strontium, a chemical component that's in other types of travertine aragonite limestone, says that it is really almost a fingerprint type match to Jerusalem. and that dirt was found around the feet where you would expect it, but it was also found on the knees and on the nose area of the shroud. There are icons. This is one of my favorite, and I love to talk to people about it. If I haven't talked to you, and you want more of this, I would love to talk to you later. There are images of Jesus that are consistent with the shroud. Facial recognition experts use points of congruence to compare faces. At 45 to 60 is good for comparison in court. This particular image, which was from St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt, it was the first picture of Jesus looking like Jesus, and it has 150 points of congruence with the shroud image. So experts say it is a certain match that those two compare. And a couple of features I'll point out that I think are particularly fascinating relative to the shroud. So one of them is there is a band around the face on the shroud. People think that that's a chin band that was used to keep the mouth closed in death. One thing that you note on these icons is they all keep a clear line between the face and the hair, just like there's a line there between the face and the hair. So we think they copied that feature, even though that wasn't really a feature of the man, it was a feature of the shroud. There is also a bulge at the neck of the shroud. So we don't think that was on the body. The statue of Jesus doesn't have that bulge at the neck. We think that's where the cloth of the shroud was caught up in the neck, around the neck area, from the neck being from the head being slightly tilted forward. But the icon makers incorporated that bulged neck as a part of the icons, and all of them have that bulged neck. And then the other feature is very bony hands. And if you look at the pictures of the shroud, I don't have a picture of the hands here, but you'll see it shortly. You can see that the shroud had very bony hands, and they included that on the icons as well. And the first of these icons, that St. Catherine's Monastery, Christ Pantocrator, that was painted in 550 AD. So I think the artist in 550 AD had seen the image on the shroud. There were ancient references, and these ancient references were in the 300 to 500 time frame, and I think they also bring the shroud to mind. There was reference to the shroud, the image of our Lord and Savior at full length, and the image-bearing icon, an image of Christ of divine origin, an image of God incarnate, a full-length body image of Jesus, and my favorite, an awesome image of Christ, which was an object of particular veneration. All these were in the time frame that those icons were starting to show up. And there was also a new Greek word that was coined during this time, a kerapoita. And a kerapoita means not made with human hands, and that was used to refer to the shroud. So you will hear people say that the shroud just showed up in France in 1353. Well, we do know where it's been everywhere since 1353, when a church was built for it to be displayed in Liry, France. And we've known every step since. It went from Liry to Chambéry to Turin, and it's been there ever since. So before that, though, we have snippets in history. We have snippets from church fathers, original church fathers, who tell us what happened in the first few years, which was the shroud went around with Peter. Peter left it behind when he went to Rome. It went to Antioch, which was a large Christian center just before Jerusalem was destroyed. It stayed in Antioch for some time until the church lost control of it, we think. And then there was that period where I've just been talking about, where it was what I call out and about in Asia Minor, and people started seeing it, painting icons of it, referencing it. And from that point, for a very long time, it was under the control of the Eastern Roman Empire, headquartered in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, and which was a Christian empire, and that's where it was. And then in 1204, while it was in Constantinople, the Fourth Crusade, which was led by Frenchmen, sacked Constantinople. And sometime between then and 1261, while French governed Constantinople, we think the shroud made its way to France. So you'll hear, we don't know anything of the early history, and that we don't have a chain of custody, but we see the shroud throughout history. So I hope I've given you a sense that it is very feasible that this is the very burial shroud of Jesus. So now I want to talk a little bit about what is particularly significant during Lent, which is the signs of the crucifixion, and in a minute the resurrection that we see on the shroud. One of the things that happened to Jesus, the first things, was he was scourged. And we see the scourge marks, and they are worse than you might get the impression from the Bible. They were, the scourging was a very big impact. So you can see the scourge marks. All of these marks are wounds from a scourge consistent with a Roman flagrum that has 3 strands and 2 metal balls on the end of each strand. So that's the photographic negative. That's what it looks like in the natural view. And you can see it really well on the back, but you can also see it up and down the body. So there are 372 wounds that were counted on the body that came from that type scourge. About 2/3 of them are on the back side, about 1/3 of them are on the front side. And we don't see, on the front of the image, we don't see the sides of the body. There would probably be 600 wounds. And doctors say that this would be very medically significant, that he would probably have lost enough blood that he would be in shock from losing that much blood. So we see wounds on the head. So Jesus is the only person in history that was referenced to have been crucified and to have a crown of thorns. And what the wounds that we see on the head are very consistent with that crown of thorns. And they're consistent not just with the circlet type crown that we often see in art, but they're consistent with a cap style crown that would be mashed down on the top of the head. And in history, Jewish kings often had the cap style crowns. So that is consistent with him being mocked as the king of the Jews. We see abrasions on the shoulders that are consistent with carrying a heavy object. We know that there is writing from the 1st century that says that most often the vertical piece of the cross was already in place, and the condemned carried the crossbar with hands loosely tied to it. That is consistent with what we see on the shroud. So we see a heavy object potentially across the shoulder. And it's easy, but the crossbeam itself alone would have weighed near 100 pounds, or maybe even over 100 pounds. So it still would have been a terrible burden. And you can imagine that potential for falling when he's already terribly wounded from the scourging, and he's carrying that heavy object on his back without being able to hold his hands. So that image of the dirt that came from the area of the knees and the nose really gives you the sense that he probably did fall on the way carrying the cross. The Bible doesn't say he fell, it only says he struggled. But I think the dirt on the knees and the nose from the shroud helps tell us that. We see the wounds in the hands and the feet. So in the feet, we see one wound that's in the front part of the foot. And people who have a pretty good sense of the geometry on the shroud believe that both feet were nailed with one nail. So one foot was flat, the other foot was put on top of it and nailed in. And it would have been nailed with enough room to push up so that they could, so that he could breathe on the cross. So the knees would have been bent. So we see the nail wound in the hand, in the left hand, and it's a little bit surprising because it's not in the middle of the palm. So in the middle of the palm, doctors immediately, when they started looking at the details of this, there was a French doctor who used cadavers to check it out and see if it was in the middle of the palm, could the body have stayed on the cross? And the answer was no, not likely. If the nail wound had been in the middle of the palm, like we see in art very often, it would have pulled through. So it certainly is consistent with physiology that the nail wound went through the wrist area. Most people these days, especially so many doctors that deal with wrist issues and carpal tunnel, they speculate most often that it went through the meaty part of the palm and then out the wrist on the other side. There's a channel there, if you look at it with x-rays, that would be a good secure place to put the nails. So that is the thinking given what we see on the shroud. And those nails, by the way, there's replicas of the nails up here. They have a head that's about 1 inch in diameter, and they're about 7 inches long. So the wound in the side. So we remember the story from John that Jesus died. We think he probably died from his heart stopping, because the gospel says that he spoke his last words and then he died. And that isn't consistent with asphyxiation. And it's also consistent that he was struggling and he died sooner than the other two condemned died, probably from that brutal beating. So Jesus died, and they were hurrying up the process to get through by the beginning of the Passover. And so instead of breaking Jesus' legs like they did the other two to speed the crucifixion, they speared him in the side to make sure he was dead. And that passage in John says, blood and water flowed from the wound. So I think most of us have thought of that in terms of theology, the beautiful theology of Jesus shedding his blood for us, of the water of baptism for us, and that is such a beautiful image. And also, when you look at the shroud, that is what we see. We see blood and water flowing from the wound. And the medical folks say that is exactly what would happen. And so not only is it a beautiful theological image, we have that image that it gives us that the shroud is really exactly as John described it in the gospel. So they say that it would have done that because the spear would have gone through the body. It would have pierced the lining of the lungs and the heart and into the heart's right atrium. And so some blood spilled out, but the heart wasn't pumping, so not a lot of blood spilled out, but that fluid that was built up around the lungs and the heart spilled out. So that blood and water that flowed is perfectly consistent and tells us that John was a very credible eyewitness. And another thing about the spear wound is it's in his right side. So people ask sometimes, so isn't the heart kind of more on the left side? Wouldn't it be on the left side? Well, Julius Caesar, of all people, documented how a Roman used a spear. And that is exactly how they use a spear. They spear in the right side going through to the heart because that puts them at the best protected advantage with their adversary. So we know that that wound is exactly like a Roman guard would do it. So the last thing on the crucifixion is the injuries on the face. I think the face is battered. It has swollen cheeks. There's broken cartilage in the nose. You have the blood drips from the crown of thorns. And you can clearly see all that has happened in the crucifixion. But that said, it is not a defeated, battered face. So I love leaving the crucifixion talk with the face and looking that is not the end of this story. And we're going to go on to the next section. But I like to share one of the quotes that I love from one of the popes. So Pope Benedict said that the shroud was the icon of Holy Saturday, where God was hidden and shrouded in stillness. I think that's beautiful. And so now we're going to go on because it doesn't end on Holy Saturday. I want to talk about the last section, which is those strange characteristics of the shroud. And I'll try to go quick on this because this is the hard stuff and I love it. And you know, I know when I see your eyes start rolling up that it's time for me to move on. So don't feel bad if you do that. But this is what links it to the resurrection. So I'll talk briefly about the blood because I haven't talked about the blood and what we know of the blood. So there are two components of the image on the shroud. One of them is blood, and everything about it looks like real blood. The blood behaves as blood. Where you have clotted blood, it separates into dark cellular mass and serum rings. Everything looks like blood. It was measured, tested in the 1970s, 1980s to be AB blood type. They had not found a complete DNA sequence of any shape or form. In fact, DNA has been very, very fragmentary, and I don't think with the age of it that they really expect to, especially not, if they found any, it would probably be contamination from some point in time. So the blood looks like blood. It has the character on the cloth that you would expect of blood. It's soaked into the cloth. Some of the blood runs through to the back side of the cloth. You can see it between the threads. It colors it. So everything about the blood looks like blood. And I'll tell you that everything that they measured said that the blood was on the cloth first and that the image came later. And the reason they say that is because where they've had the chance to look under the blood, there is none of the other image areas. So everything is consistent with the blood being there first, and the image doesn't take, if you will, where the blood is. So the second component, I'll just call the image area. And that's what is that mysterious thing of the shroud. So what makes that mysterious, vague image that you see, and what does it look like when you look at it at the microscopic level? So these are the threads as they're woven together in the cloth. This is one thread out by itself. So that one, I'm sure it got clipped off at some point. It looks pretty well worn. So a thread is made up of about 200 fibers. So this image area here is the darkest area on the image, which is the nose area. So you can see when you look at that microscopically, you can barely see anything. It just looks like a little bit of vague color, and you don't see any lines, no image. And that color everywhere is the same yellow-brown color. And where it looks like it's darker, there are more fibers in the area that have the color, and where it's lighter, there are fewer fibers in the area that have the color. And that's the nature of that image. And the color is very superficial. It's only in the top 1 or 2 fibers of the cloth. So the fibers are about half the size of a human hair. And it's only those top 1 or 2 fibers that are colored in the image. So it's so superficial that you could take a razor blade and you could scrape the image off, but you would still have a linen cloth. That's how superficial it is. So chemists say that those fibers were dehydrated. So somehow that color is not something that was added to them, it's something that leaked from the main plant cell. And they're as dark as they're ever going to be. The plant cell was discolored. So that is the nature of that image. And that is that strange image that gives you that photographic negative effect. So we can make, so we know it, we have looked at it in detail with microscopes, but it is still totally mysterious how you get that kind of detailed image out of those, all those fiber discolorations across the cloth. So a second mysterious property that is similar but different, and that is there's 3-dimensional information. And you can kind of, some of you that have looked at the shroud with the photographic negative, you can see a little bit of that 3-dimensional effect that we're talking about when you look at it. You can kind of tell, it looks like you're looking at 3 dimensions. Well, they verified it by taking a scan of the shroud and plotting it. And when they do a simple plot where everything that's darker is plotted higher and everything that's lighter is plotted lower, you get this really well resolved image that looks just like a man. And the physical features, everything is consistent with being, an actual physical body. And that again is like nothing in the world. You take any random picture or figure and you run it through that kind of process, you will not get that result. So that's the second mysterious thing. Then a really key finding in all that, which really led to the breakthrough, is that when you look at that, parts of the body that were close to the shroud but could not have been touching it, have that image, have those discolored fibers that are part of the image. And I think the best place to see it is when you look at it, the nose would definitely be touching. The eyes would not be touching. If they were touching and you pressed them down on the eyes and then you pull that cloth out, it would look distorted and you would have a really extended eye area. So the parts that were close, within about a half an inch, but not touching, colored the fibers. And so that leads to the what is it that made the image? And that is radiation. So we're familiar with radiation as a source of energy that reaches out and touches you. So the sun burns us, gives us sunburn. You have X-rays that move through your body and make pictures. You have microwaves that cook your food. So all that is natural. However, in this case, it was energy from the body that marked that cloth. And so to kind of reinforce that there's still science that relates to it. Scientists have used lasers generating vacuum ultraviolet light, and they can mark the cloth with that same superficial mark, that same discoloration, the same yellow-brown color. They just can't make it look like Jesus. So it's the body of Jesus that made it look like Jesus. And this is the experiment that showed they got that superficial yellow-brown color, but you can almost tell it's not as controlled for sure. They managed to blast it with the laser and get that superficial color, but it's not as controlled, and there is no way that they could use it to make an image. So this is the wrap up. So this is that strange effect is what leads to me saying that this is as much a picture of the resurrection as it is of anything. So the theory, and these are science theories, but they only go so far. So the theory is called disappearing body, mechanically transparent man, radiation fall through. These are the theories. So the description is Jesus is in the tomb and he's wrapped in the shroud. So that's illustrated here. So at the moment of the resurrection, Jesus is no longer solid matter. He's resurrected. He's energy. He leaves the shroud. So this is consistent with that resurrected Jesus that we see described in the gospel, where he moves into locked rooms, he appears and disappears for people. And so it's somewhat consistent. So another view of it, you have the moment of the resurrection. Jesus is energy. The energy marks the body, the shroud falls, and is left for the apostles and for us today, and he's resurrected. So another tie to that is, if you look at the characteristic of the blood and wounds on the shroud, it is notable that they are all very much in place. So Jesus was wrapped in the shroud. Those wounds are where the wounds were. They didn't get smeared. They didn't get pulled off. you look at the cloth and it's as if he just disappeared from the cloth. So that really is, I think, the wonder and the science of the shroud and the beauty of the shroud. And if you look at that as you think there's any possibility that this is the actual burial cloth of Jesus, then you know that that picture that's on this side is the one that he left for us in our time. Because the apostles got the natural view, we got that photographic negative and all the beautiful science that feeds our hearts and our minds. I really so appreciate the opportunity to share it with you here in this area, and I hope that you're inspired to pick it up and share it with someone else. So thank you so much.
How about questions? Anybody have a question?
Yes.
Well, I guess when I first started thinking about this, I thought, well, he's only got 72 hours with which to imprint. But what you're talking about is it was like a photograph when he was resurrected. That's what he's giving us a photograph. And yeah, it's beautiful.
I love that Pope Benedict. He was hidden and shrouded in stillness. Yeah. And I think so. The other beautiful thing that I don't know that I tied in is that rigor mortis that keeps the body in that position. That lasts 40 hours. The resurrection timeline from Friday at 3 o'clock to Sunday morning is 36 to 39 hours. So it's 3 days, but it's not three, it's parts of 3 days, but it's not 3 full days. So that, the fact that rigor mortis timeline is so coincident with the resurrection timeline is, I think, another beautiful gift for us.
Anyone else?
With the C14, one of the things I had heard or read a long time ago was that the area they tested was where the burn marks were, and that would automatically distort using carbon testing. Is that correct?
I think it's. I think there is still room for debate, I think, on the carbon 14. So this is another one of those things that that will probably, I don't know that we'll ever find that out. So to do more carbon 14 testing, they have to cut samples that will be destroyed. So I don't think they will do another carbon 14 test until they get some method that doesn't require destruction. So the carbon 14 came from one very, very contaminated corner. It was, I think you could, most people would agree that it's the most contaminated corner on the cloth. So their good science practice would have been to take samples from throughout the cloth, but the custodians would not let them do that. And so they said, well, that's okay. We'll just take one little sample here on this ratty end. And that's what they did. And they cut it into, they say they had 3 samples. They did not. They had 1 sample, and they cut it into multiple pieces and sent it to multiple labs. So there's different, so what we know from the statistics of their test is that their test showed they weren't testing a cohesive item. So their statistics said, you've got something else going on here. You've got multiple items. So what that is, nobody is sure. So there's different theories. So one theory is there was some modern material like cotton that got mixed in there because it was a really ratty corner, and it was very feasible that there could have been some repairs over time. And so that's probably the prominent theory that you hear. But there's nothing certain about that, it's just a theory. So the second thing that you have to consider though, and it's actually a little more consistent with their individual carbon-14 measurements, is that we don't know, science would lead you toward it being energy that made that image on the cloth. Depending on what kind of energy it was, it could change the whole carbon-14 profile. Because some things with certain actions will create carbon-14. And so that's the possibility. The one thing you can say was it was contamination. And it was a really bad corner to start with and to measure. But I doubt that the carbon-14 will be redone anytime soon.
I'll move as fast as a 75-year-old can.
Thank you. St. Acutis presented the Eucharistic miracles, and they found that pieces of the host were actually pieces of a heart. Was the blood type compatible?
Yes.
So the Eucharist is AB, and so it is here.
Yes. So to my knowledge, everything that they've tested that is associated with Jesus has been AB blood type. So the Eucharistic miracles, the shroud, and there's another cloth that was the head cloth that was folded up. That is the Sudarium of Oviedo, and it was also tested to be AB. And by the way, on it also had pollen from Jerusalem, dirt from Jerusalem on the nose area, and it was in Spain by 614 AD. So that's a really powerful connection.
Pam, we know that the body gives off chi as a natural energy. You know, I mean, was that not it that could have, due to the trauma, the chemical reactions going on with the death process and the energy release, that the body's natural chi come out to make that image?
I don't know what that is. You got to put it in terms of either X-rays or some energy that's on the side of the
points on your
spectrum.
body.
Like a meridian.
Like a meridian, not like a meridian.
Yeah, I don't know. I've got to relate it to a physical spectrum, so I don't know.
I was just curious about the coin. I've heard that there was a coin that was found on Christ's eye. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I love to talk about that. So that coin on the eye is another one of those fascinating pieces that right now is kind of put in the category of being a little controversial. So the thing is, they took a set of photographs in the 1930s that were had a different kind of lighting scheme. The person who took them didn't do the scientific setup. He was looking to make it beautiful art, and he side lit it. So it was a little different perspective. And when you look at the eyes in that photograph, you see symbols on them. And they're pretty distinctive symbols. You can look at the photos and you can see the symbols. So the controversy is, are those really, are you seeing what you think you're seeing, or are you seeing shadows from the side lighting? So the things that go along with that is, for one, they do think there probably would have been something on the eyes to keep the eyes closed. There's debate about whether Jews would ever have used a coin or not, a Roman coin or not, but you know, they think they would have put something on the eyes. So the other thing that makes it even more intriguing is they did a pretty good comprehensive comparison of those symbols that they could see on the eyes to a coin database. And so they ran it through this coin database, And the two coins that popped out, different ones on the different eyes, were both minted by Pontius Pilate in that time frame, which is to me just another gift from God. So I do not discount the coins on the eyes, but it is somewhat controversial. Yes.
Are you aware of any promising new dating methods that are being developed that might be applied in the near future?
So there are 5 dating methods that they have used that all are used on linen. So these 5 test the strength of the fiber, and they test how components in the linen decay over time. And they compare them to a database of linens and what those look like. So those are the tests that they've done already. And one of those, I think one of them, the most recent one was maybe last year that it was reported widely to the community. And so, yeah, they're developing different methods all the time. And when you look at the plot and you see, okay, there's 5 independent dating methods, all comparing to, you know, whatever was available, and all those line up here, and carbon 14's over here, it looks pretty persuasive. And then another very interesting comparison is there is a stitch, there is a side stitch. If you look at the top of the shroud, there is a strip of linen that was, we think, sewn back on in antiquity. So it's the original linen of the shroud, and it's sewn on to the top. And there's different theories about what that is, but the interesting thing is it is sewn on with a very unique stitch. And that stitch has been seen one other place, and that was from a 1st century linen that was recovered from Masada. So I think with all the evidence, 1st century, it just looks so persuasive.
You said that there are a lot of books published on the Shroud of Turin. Is there like a leading one or a authoritative one that you could recommend? Not to give everyone here additional homework, but something that you could read if you wanted to study up on this more?
I have a list that I recommend. So some of it depends. Yeah, I got a whole reading list for you. I'll send it to you and check back with you. So there are, so I'll tell you, my favorite will not be the crowd favorite. So my favorite is John Jackson's critical summary. So John Jackson was the brilliant physicist who led the U.S. team that went over in the 70s. And he has worked on the Shroud his whole life. He did that as an Air Force captain, and he has worked on the Shroud his whole life. So I like his critical summary because it is a science book. It is organized as a science book with confidence levels and with explanations. So that is my particular favorite, and it's a wonderful reference. There are some good introductory books that I'm trying to remember. I can give you the name, some of the names. I think I'm going to mess it up. I'll look it up and give you the name. And then for medical people, there are 2 clear, really good medical books. One of them is A Doctor at Calvary by Pierre Barbet. And you may have to look for that one a little bit, but I would say that is one of the crowd favorites.
Amazon, yeah.
Oh, does Amazon have Pierre Barbet? So, so the other medical one is by, I forget his first name, but Zugaby. And that is another good medical analysis. And there's some really good, just intro level, like Verschuren did maybe a Catholic, I don't know if he's the one who did a Catholic scientist looks at the Shroud of Turin. That one's a good book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Would you mention about the holes in the crossbar where the nails went through? Because you didn't have to hammer it.
Yes, so as I've talked before, thank you. One of the things that we think on the crucifixion and the characteristics, how it would happen on the crucifixion. I talked about Jesus carrying that crossbar that weighed about 100 pounds. And so what would happen when they got near the cross, the vertical piece would already be in place. They would, and the holes in the cross would already be in place for the nails. And then they would drive the nails through the hands, and then they would lift that bar up and put it on the vertical piece, and then they would drive the nail through the feet. So that's that process that we understand from writing about first century.
You triggered in me a lot the first time you talked that we were able to hear it. But tonight, in coming in, something very different happened to me. This is a little different. All of a sudden, I had a question. Everything we see that has been researched and so on, the biggest thing I see is the picture of Jesus bleeding wounds, the colors, the substance. And all of a sudden, a question came to me. Obviously, I said to myself, that means that what I'm seeing, when I'm privileged to see this a piece of material blooded by Jesus' blood. The formation of that picture, tell me if I'm wrong, includes the molecules of the very blood that coursed through the veins of my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, on this earth. The Lord that saved all of us and gave us the life we have, and the Lord that made me be able to bleed. 2 days ago, I had a wound and I bled. And I got to thinking, my Lord, that image shows his blood, not a picture of his blood. It was made, tell me if I'm wrong, it was made by the blood that coursed through his very body. And I was totally stopped. I'm a little slow sometimes, but I wanted to thank you so much because that particular thing touched me very, very deeply. Thank you.
That is beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, I have some announcements to make. I know some might want to stay and look at the displays. There's so much to read, but the alarm system goes on at 10 o'clock.
Don't be in here.
So if you don't want to see the Hamilton Township Police skedaddle, but also a few other things, just a few commercials. First, on the tables in the back, there are nice items. There's a charge for them to finance the ministry, and some are free. Take a look before you leave, okay? And you should know that this same presentation will be made at, This same presentation will be made at St. Raphael's. Excuse me, that's Wednesday night. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night at OLS, Our Lady of Sorrows, at the lower level, on the lower level at 7 p.m. And then Wednesday St. Raphael's at 6:30 in the church, okay? Just one more other thing. On behalf of the Adult Faith Formation team, Tuesday, April 21st, Dr. R.J. Snell is going to talk about AI and the Catholic moment with AI so much in the news. And then May 19th, Dr. Matthew Frank, why Catholics should celebrate our 250th anniversary. Good stuff coming up, we can learn. So please take a look, but move along, let other people see it, and God bless.